Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we've got a bit of a different episode and we're going to have an honest conversation about mental health with Peter Bacharach. So welcome to the channel, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For those that don't know, Peter is the author of 5 Steps That Beat My Depression Without Drugs. And if you've followed our work, you'll know that I'm a pharmacist as well. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today, Peter, and seeing where it goes. So what's your background?
So I'm Slovakian. As you can see, obviously, I don't have the true blue Aussie accent. I came to Australia 16 years ago. I came as a student, and I did diploma at the college. I did bachelor's, then I did MBA. I got married, I got divorced. And to cut the long story short, I guess I got married very young when I was 24, and then I got divorced when I was 29. And for a few years after that, I went on to this bit of a rampage. I was catching up with my 20s and doing things that people usually do in their 20s. And you can imagine, partying a lot, drinking a lot of alcohol, and pretty much, being lost in life.
Yeah.
And again, to shorten that, at the end of that, what it was for me, it was just this emptiness that I had there, but I was just not real with myself, and I was not aware of what that feeling of empty really means. And I was just patching it up with, with partying a lot and drinking a lot. And I'm a self-confessed functional alcoholic as well.
Yeah.
So it got to a stage where, I would fall asleep only if I had 2 bottles of wine. Without that, I couldn't fall asleep. And one thing led to another, and that turned into a big depression. And I used alternative healing method. I didn't, as I obviously write in the book or ebook, I chose not to take antidepressants, and I'll tell you a story why. And I took maybe the hard path, and the hard path was to face your demons without another patch, in my view. That would be the antidepressants, and that was painful, but it was transformational, and looking back now, I think it sounds weird, but I can tell that I'm actually grateful for that experience of having a depression, because it taught me a lot about myself, life, and taught me a lot about other people that are depressed, and I can relate to it much better now.
Yeah, it's probably something that we find a lot in society now, that people graduate uni and they get that job, and life hits them pretty hard, and all of a sudden you're stuck in that routine of 9 to 5, and people sort of not enjoying life, or it's not exciting and challenging. And a lot of people, and some of the statistics we read in Australia are pretty staggering, particularly for men.
Yeah, that's true. So there's 8 suicides a day in Australia, and 6 of them are men. Suicide is probably the ultimate cost of people not facing their demons or facing their feelings, or not really addressing the issues, that we so comfortably do not address. We try to hide it with different behaviors, and for me it was alcohol. For other people it can be drugs. For other people it can be even exercise. Exercise, when it becomes obsessive, is not really that good. And as well, a lot of emotional eating that people have. But I guess my experience was something that triggered me to help in this area, and then I work in banking. I'm a contractor business analyst, and currently I work in Westpac in Sydney. And I'm a very, very strong advocate of mental health awareness. And I'm now what they call, there's a new term for this, it's the lived experience mental wellness speaker. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's an actual title. Through that, I choose to help other people and maybe lead by example, if you can call it that way, where I want to be the evidence that there is a better way, that you can actually get out of it, that there is something on the other side of the darkness, as you call it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mention all those things. So whether it's alcohol, drugs, even exercise, a lot of these things are tied to dopamine in our pleasure centers in our brain. Some medications act on that area, and others act on different parts, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But certainly we wanted to talk about this because in our industry with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, or investing in general, it tends to be pretty male dominated. And at the moment, markets are down. It's a very stressful time. So I definitely wanted to dive into into this area today, because I read a statistic that between the age of 35 and 44, Australia has the highest rates of depression in the world, which is just crazy, something I did not realise. So talk about your journey and why you chose to not go down the drug path. And before we do that, we should preface this by saying that we're not encouraging people to avoid antidepressants altogether. And I'll talk about some use cases where I think they're definitely needed. But if you're on medication, we don't want anyone watching this video and stopping, because withdrawal can be very nasty. And should also always talk to your doctor or GP about the options rather than making a decision yourself.
100%. And maybe to add on top of what you just said as well, is that mental health is not exactly the same like physical health. Like when you break your arm, and when you break your arm, we go to the doctor and they will use the same treatment, right? There might be little deviations of what sort of casket they will give you, but the treatment and the approach will be exactly the same. With mental health, whether they anxiety, depression, bipolar, and there is all kinds of disorders or illnesses, as we choose to call it these days. Even within those brackets, when you get labeled with one of them, even within those, everybody deals with their stuff differently. So this is my journey, and if that can help someone, great. But I'm not saying that this is the, recipe for everybody. As you already touched on it, I think that antidepressants can be good in certain situations for certain people for a certain period of time. And as well, the doctor should be able to help you, or some professional should be able to help you, whether you are going through a depressive period or whether you are actually depressed. Because that is a massive difference. And when you are going through a depressive period and you get antidepressants, you can actually really harm yourself with that too. Back to my story and why I chose not to take antidepressants. I was doing really badly, and I actually was in a position where I couldn't look after myself. So I had a friend that had to stay with me. I didn't work, and this is a bit of an irony, because I always try to be that that alpha male, always good at sports and lift heavy and harden the life up. If 5 years ago somebody told me that I'm depressed, I would just tell them, "What are you doing, mate? Put your shit together. What does that mean?" And I kind of life gave me a slap, and definitely a lesson in humility. And it was funny, because when I was incapable of operating or functioning, which was about 2 to 3 months, the friend that looked after me was my gay 50-year-old man who is very feminine, right? So there was an irony as well, that this masculine dude, this guy who lifts heavy, he can't operate. And this, gay guy, this feminine guy is actually, without him, I wouldn't make it. I can say that, So it's just funny that how life turns out, So I was at home, and I was really not doing well. And then one Saturday morning, my depressive period usually came on in the mornings. So I would wake up and I had this massive wave, that I would just go crazy, and my mind would just spiral into this complete mindfuck. It was just like crazy. And then one day it was so bad that my friend said, "Well, look, I had enough. I can't look at you that way anymore. I'm taking you to a mental health emergency." I didn't even know that there is a thing like that, right? So he took me there, and then I was waiting there for about, an hour and a half, and there was some serious cases there. But I was, again, looking back, it just shows me how out of it I was there, because I was sitting there next to a really heavily schizophrenic person. And I talked to this guy for half an hour, and I couldn't actually thought that he was a nice guy. My mate sat there next to me, and he's looking at me like, "Can't you see that he's like, this guy believed that he's being watched by aliens?" A couple of times he got up and hid behind the corner and said that he's being watched. And I actually thought that he's normal. And that's the state I was in. And then I went into the room, and I talked to this psychologist or psychiatrist, one of them. I'm not sure who that was, but he gave me this standard test, to identify what's wrong with me. And that test, it's a test where pretty much anybody can be identified as depressed, and anybody can be identified as not depressed. It's very general. and it doesn't take into consideration your hormonal balance or chemical balance of the body. It's just some random questions, that somebody asks. And then at the end of the question, there was like 45 questions. He told me, okay, well, I can say that you're clinically depressed and we probably will need to give you antidepressants. And I go, well, I knew that something is wrong. I knew that I'm probably depressed. And I'd like to know more, a little bit about, how are you going to give me these antidepressants? Because I made some research on it and there's quite strong side effects. How do we choose the brand? And he goes, look, we don't really know. It's just trial and error. And I go, okay, so we try one brand and then how long does it take until it starts working? And it goes 4 to 6 weeks. And I go, okay, what then? Well, then if it doesn't work, we'll just give you a different brand. Right? And I go, okay, this is interesting. I kept on going, right? And I go, all right, so how do we choose the first brand? And he goes, look, let's just Google it. Right? So there in front of me in his room, he opened up Google and he goes, top 10 antidepressants in Australia. He typed that in, he pressed search, and we looked at it together. So this was his diagnosis, and this was his way of giving me the appropriate set of pills. And that's when the light bulb in my head just goes boom, boom, and I was like, no way I'm taking this. Like, this is not gonna be for me. I can't do it. This guy, maybe he really doesn't know, maybe he doesn't care. In hindsight, he made me a favor as well, because if he told me exactly what brand is good for me, I would have probably taken it. So again, in hindsight, good that he didn't. But I go, I'm not taking this, So I left, and that's when I made the decision that I'm going to tackle this, the alternative way. And that's where the pain started, really. The pain started because I didn't have any more, I guess, tools, to hide away from my pain. And that's why I used an emotional healing method, which is called The Journey by Brandon Bass. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but it's a method where you drop through emotions that you feel on the surface, and you go into the core of each of that emotion. And it's kind of like an onion technique where you peel through it, and you drop through, and that's when I faced my biggest demons, my biggest fears, and biggest pain. And after that, for a month, my ritual was that I woke up every day, I cried for half an hour. That was kind of my emotional detox. I didn't really know why I'm crying. There was nothing really wrong with me. And then eventually, it started getting better. It started getting better and better and better.
That's interesting you say. A lot of people that, you hear it as bottling up emotions and then it all boils over is probably that broad explanation that people have heard. But from a chemical level, if you haven't explored those pathways or those feelings, sometimes it's your body's way of getting back into balance by going too far and crying and being over emotional, and your brain is rebuilding those chemicals to a certain degree and exploring those pathways in the brain that have been shut off. So it's all very interesting to me from a pharmacist point of view to hear these stories, and I heard them every day at work. Particularly the question when people come in with their script for the first time and tell me about this antidepressant. And broadly, there's a few different categories. So some of them work on serotonin, which is, I guess, the happy and the love chemical. Some of them work on dopamine, which is that reward feeling as well. Then we have some that sort of work on adrenaline a little bit. Then we have the sort of anxiety drugs, which are just trying to, I guess, slow you down, relax you, is probably a good explanation. And within those categories, there's multiple brands, and then there's multiple in that actual category itself, slightly different molecules. So it's very scary. If you go to Google, there's probably 50 antidepressants or more now. So
yeah,
and unfortunately, as you say, some have slightly different criteria when doctors will prescribe them, but for the same person with depression, any one of those 50 could help any of those people. And unfortunately, it can take 4 to 6 weeks, as you say, to get those results. And that's all pretty scary to hear for someone for the first time.
Absolutely.
Anything to add to that, Peter? Or?
Well, I guess maybe I can add to that as well, but I'd like to ask you maybe a question as well. Here is that, what doesn't kind of add up for me is we know that these pills will be, rebalancing or readjusting your hormonal levels. So why people are not put through any hormonal tests before they are prescribed certain type of pill?
Yeah, so again, I'm not a specialist, but my understanding is that doing a blood test and measuring your calcium levels to see if you've got strong bones, that's a pretty simple test that people can do. Chemicals that live in the brain don't get into the bloodstream. There's a blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
So we can't, to my knowledge, it's not easy just to do a test and say someone's got low serotonin or low dopamine. And someone may have normal levels of a chemical but have the receptors on their brain cells are the abnormality. And this is right at the cutting edge of where we're getting in the field of medicine in learning what's genetics and what's gene expression versus what's chemical levels. So a lot of this is unknown, and that's pretty scary when you're at uni to learn how's the brain work, and the lecturers sort of say we don't know. There's certain things that we have ideas about, but that's probably the best answer I can give. That a lot of it is trial and error. And again, I want to highlight that if someone is going through a really rough stage, or you've tried a few of these other things, and that's probably what I want to stress today, the things that we're going to talk about is worth trying and seeing if you can improve it through these natural or less harmful methods. But if someone's going through a very bad time in their life, I've definitely seen people that these have helped, and some people have been on them long term, and that's the only thing that helps them. So again, we're not here to say that that's bad in every case by any measure at all.
I mean, if it is like a question of life and death, you will take it, and you should take it. I mean, if you are suicidal and there's this pill that, even if it is placebo effect, even if that, right, you should still take it, because if that's gonna save you, that's what you're gonna have to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky because I think looking back, I had that. Somehow I made that decision internally that I'm gonna get better. I believe that I will get better, that this will pass. And there's this notion of impermanence where you gotta realize that everything one day will change. So even that shithole where you are, it will pass one day, and it will get better.
I think maybe sometimes people just aren't told about some of these other options to explore, I guess. So exercise is definitely something that stimulates the brain, releases those feel-good chemicals. Again, it can get to that point. You see some people that are actually addicted to going to the gym as well, so it can get to that extreme level. But for the average person, they recommend, if you're not healthy, going for a 30-minute walk every day is fine. But if you're young and fit, then going to the gym, getting up that heart rate, it's definitely been shown to increase the level of these hormones and your overall feeling of well-being.
Yeah, and then just another point, but we probably can't, I can't elaborate on it too much, but as well, it's proven that gut health is really one of the things that can impact your mental health too, very significantly. So your nutrition, and again, this is individual. Your nutrition will definitely determine your mental state, and that's something that people need to be aware of as well. Like, if you're feeling bad and you keep on drinking alcohol and then you don't have proper breakfast, that's probably not the right way to go.
Yeah, no. 70% of our immune system is actually in our guts, in our intestines, and often overlooked, as you say. So all part of that complete package, and I guess that's something that's the message doesn't get across, that all these little things can add up to something that can help you. So you shouldn't just try that one thing or that other thing. It's living a holistic life, I guess, to try and add up. Yeah. So the other thing to talk about is probably diet as well. I know we spoke in the pre-interview, you were saying that those far northern European countries that don't get vitamin D and have high rates of depression. And that's certainly something that we get more sunlight in Australia, but now we work indoors. Basically, nearly everyone that's tested, I think they almost this year changed the recommendation to stop testing people, I know, in Tasmania, because everyone was vitamin D deficient. So it's just the recommendation now for people to take vitamin D in winter. If you're not outside and getting sunlight, you're always working indoors, and those chemicals are the precursors to make those hormones in your body, serotonin and dopamine. Healthy foods, a balanced diet, all those things make these chemicals in the brain. So if you're eating a poor diet, you're not giving your body the chance to make these chemicals.
But how funny is that in a country like Australia, where we have a lot of sun, a lot, we are supposed to take additionally, vitamin B, which is again through your mouth. Is not the natural way to get vitamin D. So it's interesting, and this is probably not the way we want to go in this discussion, but the conspiracy theorist would say, is it really bad for you to get certain amount of exposure to sun as opposed to being indoors and then buy vitamin D pills? What's better? Like naturally, you probably would be better off getting the sun outside, right?
Yeah. Your body can get healthy vitamin D through diet. So it doesn't have to all come from the sun. So fatty fish, those sort of things. Yeah. But it's certainly something that's been discussed now. The slip, slop, slap campaign in Australia. We're covering up too much now to the point that we're not getting vitamin D naturally, but at the same time, we don't want everyone getting sunburnt in the harsh Australian sun, so it's a trade-off.
That's true, yeah.
But we will move on.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else that you wanted to talk about, Peter?
So I guess maybe what I can talk to a little bit is the 5 steps that I describe in my ebook, and then really quickly what these 5 steps are and what they were for me, and how I got out of depression, and that probably can have some, provide some tips. So my first step, and this is the most important step, is that admit that you have a problem. And this is something that is, number 1, hard to admit for people, and number 2, very hard to admit for men, right? And if it's emotional, there's a whole now campaign about, men being able to speak up about their emotions. And that goes back to the point that you made before, bottling up the emotions and not sharing stuff. And when you compare men and women, women talk just for the sake of talking. There doesn't need to be an outcome, and men many times make fun of it. But again, it's kind of like it's like healthy, because you have a chat with friends. It doesn't need to go anywhere, but it's healthy. It's you kind of share how you feel. We don't do that as men, Men, we have to be hard. We don't cry, and then all those thoughts and lessons from our fathers and grandfathers, big boys don't cry, and harden up. Don't be a sissy, don't be a princess. So obviously, that's something that if it is really living at your subconscious, it's not going to help you get through your emotional challenges, And for me, the part that is really powerful is to be vulnerable and to be able to say how you really feel and admit that you have a problem and say, hey, I need help, And you don't have to advertise it to the whole world, but please pick someone that you are comfortable to share that with. And it doesn't necessarily need to be your friends or your close family. Many times it's actually not. And I don't know about you, but I've had many times some of the deepest conversations with random strangers that, you just have a good connection with. And so that's step number 1. Number 1 is that, hey, I need help. I have a problem and we need to do something about it. Because, there's that saying, if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
Yeah, I don't want to jump around too much, but it's funny that you say that. That first step can be the hardest. And some of the latest trials now using MDMA or, ecstasy, as people have probably heard it, getting people to talk about those things in a therapy session has had profound results. So it's sometimes that in those studies, it's pushing people to talk about these things and open up. But obviously, encourage people to just talk about it with friends if they can.
Yeah. And it's and for men especially, it's hard, and there's funny statistics as well here where, I think that it went like this, that 80% of men think that they are there emotionally for their friends. So we as men, we think, oh yeah, I'm here for my mates, like they can share anything with me. However, only 40% of mates feel like their mates are there for them emotionally, right? And as well, we guys, we don't really call each other if nothing's going on, right? So you have mates that you haven't talked to for a year, and then you catch up, everything is great. You think about the old times, But if you're not doing well, you're not going to go, hey, I'm not doing well, can we talk about it? It's not something that we do as men. And that's something that girls do and that women do. And that's why even though I think the depression rate or suicide, the depression rate is, I think, higher, but in between women, but the suicide is lower because they just talk about it. They share it, so they have a way to deal with it. So I guess that's back to your point, is the number one and most important step, and that's admit you have a problem and ask for help. And that's the biggest challenge we have in the men community in Australia, and I think around the world.
Yeah.
The second step for myself was to allow to feel all the feelings, and this is feel the pain, right? So in our society, we tend to avoid the bad feelings, the negative feelings, But at the end of the day, it's like the weather metaphor. There's no bad weather or good weather. There's just weather.
Yeah.
So there's no bad feelings or good feelings. These are feelings. And part of life is to experience bad feelings.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? And the bad like if somebody close to you dies, it's natural that you're going to have a period of grieving.
I think that's a big topic that doesn't get talked about enough, that it's very normal for people to feel these feelings, and those circumstances, as we say, when people need antidepressants, that's fine. But if someone's broken up with their girlfriend, it's natural to feel sad, or someone's passed away in your life, bad things have happened. It's a natural process of your body going through these balances of chemicals, and you'll come out the other side and learn from an experience or whatever that may be. Whereas some people rush to the doctor the next day, and is masking those feelings with an antidepressant the best outcome? And that's where I think it can get a little bit messy sometimes, and I'd encourage people to explore the options with your doctor rather than go straight to the antidepressant.
Yeah. And I think more and more doctors are actually opening up to these opportunities as well. And I think more and more are starting to be a bit more careful, instead of like, hey, take these pills, you're going to feel fine. Maybe see a counselor, maybe see a psychologist, maybe there is, before you get on pills, maybe there is an alternative way of dealing with your current emotional state.
Yeah.
Step number 3 for me was to accept and let go of the past. So there was a lot of things that I've kind of done that I'm maybe not proud of, maybe behaved to people in a way that I shouldn't have. And as well, as men, we have that, a lot of men have that, I guess, that feeling that we are not good enough, because we compare ourselves to, if I'm going to compare myself to Elon Musk, it's probably not going to be going that well for me, Yeah. So you got to be realistic as well about your life and who you are, and accept who you are and accept your past, because past is something that you cannot change, and you can look into the future and make the future better. But accepting and letting go of the past is easier. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's actually quite hard step. It's like holding a grudge, So don't hold grudge towards you about your own past. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah.
And then step 4. Step 4 was for me was more like, what do you do when you get better and life comes back at you? So you have to. I call it the business as usual hacks. So what do you do when you get better and you improve and your life improves, and then something again happens, that can throw you back, and you might have a relapse, and I had a relapse as well. But I guess the steps that help, is you got to trust yourself. You've come a long way, and you can do it again. So how it is. How it is to deal with it. Another tool here is talk and share. Be open and about how you feel, and get help, and have somebody that can listen to you when you need it. And for me, the last tool was the release. For me, like I still cry every now and then. And it's not this bad crying. I don't really know why I'm crying, but I just, instead of bottling it up, I just close myself sometimes in the room, and I just let it go. And for me, it comes through crying. For other people, it can come through hitting a bag, boxing bag. For other people, it can come through going for a run. For other people, it can come through hitting fists into your pillow. Whatever works for you. For me, the release is crying. I don't cry every day, but I guess I can say maybe like every month, and it doesn't have to be complete falling apart, but just,
I guess I would
a
add
bit
to
emotional.
that things that people can find as an outlet. For some people, it's religion or spirituality,
Yeah.
meditation. A lot of these things, 15 minutes a day can undo a day's worth of cortisol and stress hormones. So from a pharmaceutical chemical point of view, it really is proven that these things work to get rid of that stress before you go to bed, have a good night's sleep. It all comes part of that holistic approach.
Yes, 100% agree. And and the last step for me is the live from gratitude. So I guess it follows onto what you just said. Have that daily routine where you realize where you are. I mean, there's a saying that no matter how bad you feel, there's always someone that has it worse than you. You know, and especially in a country like Australia, we have it quite easy. Relatively. And I don't want to be discounting the hardship that some people are going through in this country, but when you compare it to some third world countries like India or China, where people don't have drinkable water, we do have it okay, in this country. And then focusing on the positives, we as human beings, we tend to have that negativity bias. You do 10 things and one of them doesn't work out. You don't think about the 9 good ones. You think about the bad one, right? So have that gratitude. I'm healthy today. There's a nice sun. I have a job. My crypto portfolio is looking good. And even if it doesn't, I have crypto portfolio. So there's always that, I guess, positive spin that you can have. And as well, there's this one really good tool that I've been using lately. It's from positive psychology. It's www. What went well today? Focus on what went well, instead of identifying the risks and identifying the hard stuff. What is good about your day today?
Yeah, I know plenty. Oh, my mum goes to Africa every year to put in water wells for the poor countries and communities, and the kids that don't have shoes, they don't have food, they don't have anything, and they're running around, big smiles on their faces, never been happier. And yet we go to these countries where there's probably been a never better, higher standard of living, and we have all these first world problems, I guess, that we let consume us.
Yes, I agree. And again, sometimes it's easier said than done, but it comes through practice, and you need to be aware of your thoughts, and kind of become your own observer, and maybe observe yourself. What are you thinking? Because you are not really your thoughts, and that's probably another discussion. But are these thoughts that you are having right now, are they actually helping you? Is it something that is making you feel better, or is it something that is making you feel worse? And become aware of that those patterns in your thinking. Do you look at the thing and do you think, oh, this is good? Do you look at something, do you tend to criticize it, or do you tend to look at it from the good perspective? I don't know. So everybody needs to figure out what works for them, and many times you will try things that will not work for you. So you just have to keep going and try something else.
Fantastic. Well, we could talk all day, Peter. I know that I find this topic so interesting, and I've actually planned on expanding into these sort of things on the channel in the future as well. So any final thoughts? I really appreciate you joining us today.
I know that we actually had, I probably had one, but I forgot right now. Maybe you can. Is there anything else?
I mean, I guess...
I think we had a great chat, yeah.
Yeah, wrapping up, I guess just explore exercise, explore your diet, meditation, ways to unwind stress, speaking up about it. I guess that's probably just a quick summary, and talk to your doctor if you're on these medications or you're thinking about taking them. Just have those honest conversations with a healthcare professional.
What I really liked what you did when we had one of the blood baths lately. You kind of, I think that there was maybe you have done it several times, but once I remember that you just switched off for a couple of days and you went somewhere in Tassie, somewhere to the bush, and you just said, I'm clearing my head, I'm not going to be available, and that's one way of dealing with stuff too. You just switch off from the world and you just spend a little bit of time by yourself, You know?
Yeah, and it was only honestly an hour or so to get out there. I don't have time to go for a couple of days at this stage, but that's all it is. It's just that hour or two to get away from it all, clear your mind, think about everything, and that I find that as a really great release.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Peter. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Cool, mate. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.